something that is a good look for a very particular individual is Javonte Willaims. He has a new contract with the Dallas Cowboys, 3 years, $24 million, very similar to the DeAndre Swift deal that we were talking about a couple of off seasons ago with the Chicago Bears. At first it looked a little dicey, but he had a nice year for the Bears, had over 1,000 yards. The Bears obviously won a playoff game, and he was a big part of Ben Johnson's attack. I think we want to talk first about, why the Cowboys did it. What was their incentive? Why not, go out and draft a guy? Because we talked about last week with Kenneth Walker how running backs are the biggest disparity in the NFL when it comes to supply and demand. There is a lot of supply for running backs. Like, it is probably one of the easiest positions to acquire a good running back, right? So that's why a lot of people are in the don't pay running backs club. Obviously, even though it's a 3 year, $24 million deal, isn't going to break the bank, but that is big money for a running back. So, Patrick, when you think about Javonte Willaims and the Cowboys getting this done, what was your first impression of why Dallas did this for a guy like Javonte Willaims?
Well, let's be honest about Javante and what he's been throughout his career. He started his NFL career really strong. He did. He was phenomenal. It wasn't the numbers as much, but you watch the guy play. He was a standout running back. There was no doubting that. His ability to just run the football, break tackles. He really looked like one of those guys. Then he got hurt. All of a sudden, everything seemed to fall apart. Revamped his career with the Cowboys this year. Part of that was the offensive line playing great, which is part of the reason it's difficult to value a running back like this. But another part of it was just him being a very good running back. He ran the ball really well this year, right? So why did they do it? Well, it is only 8 million per year. It's not breaking the bank. He is a very talented running back. So paying him like 12 million, I have a little bit more of a disagreement with. But just 8 million, I mean, he's only 25 years old. It's not like he's near 30. By the time this contract wraps up, he'll be 28. I'm for it. I do support this because it is a relatively cheaper deal. I do like it. I like the offensive line, but you're not going to have to pay Tyler Booker anytime soon. You're not going to have to pay a younger offensive line until later on. For right now, might as well pay the running back while you have the money. I do think Javante is a capable guy. And like I mentioned, just 25 years old. The injury history is a little bit concerning, but coming off of a very good season, I don't see why you can't get a year or two more of some great play out of him.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know, I would describe you as probably the leader of the Don't Pay Running Backs Club. So to hear your optimistic outlook on this deal and what the Cowboys did, I think is really illuminating for people who maybe are on the other side of it and saying, "Oh, don't pay a running back." He had he's cashing in on one good year. I'll say this, and maybe this is because I'm such a fantasy nerd. I've always been a huge fan of Javonte Williams. Like, I've always thought, even coming out of North Carolina, I thought that he was a tremendous talent with Denver. Like you said, the stats don't paint the full picture of just how good he was. His contact balance, his yards after contact. Like, I remember all those numbers were elite. And this is a guy who, like you said, dealt with some injuries the past couple years, and he did not sign a big deal in free agency last year with the Cowboys. It was, if I remember correctly, a 1 year, $3 million deal. And I remember at the time saying this has the opportunity to be a real steal for the Dallas Cowboys, and it was. And, we can give the Cowboys as much shit as we want. And trust me, I will be the first in that line. But they really kind of hit two home runs, two really good value home runs with George Pickens and Javonte Williams, who they paid a combined like $6 million last year. Now, that, as we'll get into later, those numbers will both go up, including what just happened with Javonte Williams. But I'm with you. Like, I think that this is a really inoffensive deal. Like, it's not a deal that is going to absolutely crumble the Cowboys. It's $8 million a year for a guy who just had 1,000 yards. I think the other great point of that is you're right. He's 25. Like, he is not. This is not a guy with a lot of tread on the tires. This is not a guy who you think is going to break down by the end of this contract. He's young. His legs are relatively fresh. He had a great season last year for Dallas, and I think what we saw last year was his ability to be a big play running back, right? And I think that that's something that we hadn't seen from the Cowboys in a while. He was a big play, explosive play guy. He was a guy who was able to take their offense to the second level. And in an offense with Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, a guy like George Pickens who came in last year. I mean, again, we could talk about the Cowboys all we want. Their offense was not the problem last year. They were not one dimensional. They made defenses respect the run while also having to respect two excellent receivers on the outside and a pretty good tight end, Jake Ferguson. So keeping the band back together and trying to run it back, at least with Javonte Williams, to me is a good move for the Cowboys. I mean, it didn't break the bank. This isn't like, you're totally relying on this guy. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, whatever. But this to me is just like a good, solid, drama-free move from the Dallas Cowboys, and that's not something they've been known for the past couple of years.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, and this is not the type of team I want to gas up.
Me neither.
But in all honesty, the Cowboys are what? A good draft and a good free agency class away from being like a really damn good team. They just have to fix the defense up. That's it. They don't have to be crazy. If they get a good edge rusher, right? If Christian Parker can do what we expect him to do with that secondary, which again, he's a great DB coach, so why wouldn't he be able to do that now as the defensive coordinator coming in from Philly? Get another year of DeMarvin Overshawn. He looked like a very good linebacker when he came back from injury. We saw what Quinion Williams did for them at the end of the year. I really think that's it. That's all they need to just be a competent defensive unit, to just be a good unit, a fine unit. And then the offense can do the rest. They still have that offensive core, which is the big thing. I don't really see much of a reason that defense can't make the jump from absolutely horrendous to average to maybe even a little bit above average.
Yeah. Yeah.
They
I
would
mean,
be a great team. Great
yeah.
team.
And I think so many people correctly said that they are the NFC Cincinnati Bengals. They are a team with, you like their quarterback, you like their weapons, you like their offense. Their defense is horrendous. And I will say, I think one of the more underrated coaches in the NFL last year was Brian Schottenheimer. Their offense was legitimately
Yeah.
awesome. Their
Yeah.
defense was legitimately horrible. Part of that is Matt Eberflus. Part of that, like you said, is they need some guys. But there's a handful of teams that have a better interior of their defensive line than the Dallas Cowboys. And we talked about last week how the interior of the defensive line is now potentially more important than the exterior of your defensive line, your edge rushers, right? You're absolutely correct. They need to kill the draft. Jerry Jones needs to roll back the clock to like 1995 and start
Well,
landing some
they
studs.
do draft well. They have
They do
drafted
draft
well
well. They
recently.
do draft well, but there's plenty of holes on that defense
Yep.
that they need to fill. So I'm saying they need to nail specific positions in the draft. But why wouldn't the Cowboys be a much better team next year? I mean, we don't imagine their division being incredible. Philly's kind of had a stranglehold on it for the last 3 years. They might actually like beat each other up. Who knows? Who knows what's going on in Philly these days? So I'm with you. Like, I am pro this move. I am pro what the Cowboys are starting to build on the offensive side of the ball. And like we said, if they make some improvements on defense, hey man, the Cowboys might win the East next year. I'm not gonna like stick my chest out and like puff it and be all pro Dallas, but I can see a world where the Cowboys win 10, 11 games next year. I mean, is that not a? I don't think that that's a distant reality. But before we get too far in our delusions, and maybe we're being brainwashed like Cowboys fans have been for 30 years, this does have a big implication on the upcoming running back market. And, we talked again, obviously, last week about Kenneth Walker, Super Bowl MVP. He's a free agent. Another guy who we're going to get into in a few minutes is a free agent. Javonte Williams, free agent. And we saw the first domino fall with this contract. 3 years, $24 million. Again, very similar to the DeAndre Swift deal that we saw signed a couple of years ago. Um, I'm curious, Patrick, what your thoughts are on how this affects Brees Hall, how this affects Kenneth Walker. I mean, we always say, like, you don't want to be the first guy to sign your contract, right? Because then the next guy bumps it up and the next guy bumps it up. I would imagine that this makes the agents of both of those guys very happy because now they have a baseline, like a starting level for those deals. And we're going to see higher AAVs. We might see a higher signing bonus, higher guarantees. What are your thoughts on kind of how this affects both of those guys going forward?
I don't think that. I don't. Here's my honest answer. If this is considered a needle mover, I mean, how do we look at like the DeAndre Swift deal? You said it earlier. DeAndre Swift is even with this in terms of AAV, 8 million per year. For Javonte Williams, that might even make the market worse because Javonte Williams was such a good back last year. Him getting paid the same amount as DeAndre Swift, that doesn't move the needle. That doesn't. I mean, I'm surprised because the consensus opinion does seem to be, oh yeah, Javonte got paid. Now everyone's really going to be getting a boatload of money, and I just don't see it that way. I really don't. I think Javonte Williams, if we were implying that the running back position was more valuable than this, then he would get paid a lot more money than this. But him, a player of his caliber, getting paid less money than some backup quarterbacks, that tells you exactly what you need to know about the running back market. It really does. This doesn't move the needle. It just makes it more clear exactly how poorly the running back market is operating right now. And again, you know me. And for those of you that don't, you said it earlier. I've been big on not paying running backs. I think that this makes sense for them to have not paid him a lot of money. I don't understand how people are finding a way to spin this into some major positive for the running back market. A running back market that honestly doesn't deserve to get paid an absurd amount. Now, credit to all those players. The running backs are phenomenal athletes, very tough athletes. But do they really bring that value? Right? Clearly, the Cowboys don't think so. They paid their lead horse once again less than 10 million per year. That's what I
Yeah, and that's interesting because you could see it from that perspective where we think about this guy who's such a good player, and it's like the ceiling is DeAndre Swift money, right? We know it's not the ceiling, but the relative ceiling is DeAndre Swift money. Where I would, I guess, interpolate that a little differently is Javonte Williams is a guy who, the biggest complaint about running backs is injuries, injuries, injuries. They're the guys with the most tread on their tires. They get hurt, their ankle, their knee, their Achilles, whatever. And that's the kind of perception that Javonte Williams had the past couple of years. So in a sense, right, if you look at the player who he was a few years ago to what he was last year, this is a guy who was a one-hit wonder, right? And so for a guy to get quality running back money, which is what $8 million is, as a one-hit wonder, that tells me that guys like Kenneth Walker and guys like Breece Hall, who, I know Breece Hall had the ACL really early in his career, but otherwise have had between the two, no major injuries, good production each year of their career. The Breece Hall, especially on a really horrible Jets team, who for stretches, I mean, he was their only, really reliable player. I think that bodes well for them in the sense that they don't have that injury concern that Javonte Williams had years prior to this. So I do think if you are Kenneth Walker's agent, if you're Breece Hall's agent, whatever, you say, okay, this guy, missed a couple of years. He had banged up knee injuries, whatever. Had one great year. He's getting 8 million AAV. That's the start for us because we've had multiple good years in a row. We haven't had, a really recent career-threatening injury. Obviously, in the case of Kenneth Walker, you say, I was Super Bowl MVP, right? In the case of Breece Hall, you say, all right, you don't get me back. Who are you depending on? So I do actually think that the market improves for them. I don't know that they're gonna get 15 AAV. That's, I think, ridiculous. But I could see one of those guys getting 10, 11. I really could, especially Kenneth Walker. But I do think that there is an argument to be made that the market for those guys is going to be much better.
do you think that you're saying much better
Multiple $1 million
before
AAV better is what I should be specific.
before this Javante deal? You thought they were going to make what, 8 million?
I think I was in the range that Ken Walker was going to get about 10, and I think Brees Hall was going to
Well,
get about 9.5. Now I'm
you just said
thinking,
11, so
well,
that's such a minute difference.
yeah. I think if Brees was going to get 9.5, I think now he's going to want 10, 11, and I think K9's going to get 12, 12, 13. Like I think the market went up multiple million AAV for both of those guys. So for me, when we're talking about 8 million, 2 million is a significant amount. So I'm not saying
I
they're going to get
think
15.
either way, DeAndre Swift was a benchmark, no
Yeah. Oh, of
matter
course he
what.
was. Of course he was.
So adding Javante, who I think people agree is more valuable than DeAndre
Hmm.
Swift in that 8 million category, I don't think that makes an overwhelming difference.
But I would
I
also
don't. If
say
anything, it drops the value.
I
What?
would also say if that's the if 8 million is the going rate, good running back, gets you 1,000 yards, won't change the game, isn't a superhuman athlete, but a solid running back is 8 million. I would categorize Brees Hall and Kenneth Walker in a tier above, which then would tell me, okay, we're in a different tier of contracts. We're hitting 8-digit deals, more so than a guy like Javonte Williams, who obviously is getting eight. Again, like that's kind of the logic that I have here. I
I,
understand what
I
you're
I
saying,
just think either way that was the case, even before Javante got the deal.
but I think now there's a starting point in negotiations, and it
I
raises the
think so
floor
too.
of what the AAV would have been because Javante signed for 2 years, 2 years 15 or 3 years 19 or whatever. Him getting 8 AAV raises the floor in negotiations for whatever team is going to bid for their services. Is my thinking on that?
I will say what I find interesting. And I don't know if this really has to do with Javante, but the recent rumors that Jameer Gibbs is going to reinvent the market.
Yeah, but he's
That should be.
we're talking
I mean,
Javante, we're
he's like
talking K9, we're
he's the top.
talking
Yes,
yeah,
I do think that that's something I'm definitely keeping my eye on.
yeah,
If you
we're
want to talk about the big change in the running back market, it's going to be that
yeah, yeah. I
because it's
I agree.
also if he gets extended, Bijan's
Bijan, oh
probably
yeah,
gets
Bijan's
extended
getting a
too,
deal. Bijan's getting a
and
deal for
that
sure.
both of those two are gonna. It'll be a T.J. Watt, Miles Garrett situation in terms of payment. One of those guys are going to get paid first. The other guy's going to get paid a
Dude,
little bit more, and that's going to reinvent the
not to
market.
get too ahead of a potential future segment, dude, those guys might break 15, 16 AAV. I mean,
Very
we're
likely,
I think I
definitely.
think
I
we're
think without a doubt they will.
those two guys, I mean, again, versatile, relatively injury free, superstar offensive changers. I mean, what's the gripe about paying those guys other than don't pay running backs, right? There is no argument to not pay either one of those guys. But like I said, we're gonna hold that conversation for a different day.